Today I'm going to be building a very large sofa table. The top's going to be made out of some cherry, and the legs, the rails, and the understructure is going to be made out of some pine. The top's really the only part that's going to be visible because the sofa is up against the wall, so it makes sense to build this out of some cheaper secondary lumber. I haven't really talked about the design yet. This is a commission piece for a friend of the family, and it's being designed to go behind a sectional sofa, one of those giant L-shaped things that you usually put in the theater room of your house. So I wasn't kidding when I said very large. The sectional sofa is like 68 inches on the short end and like 114 inches on the long side. You can't really make something like that in one piece, or at least I can't. It would never fit through the door of my shop. So what this really means is that I'm making 3 tables. There'll be 2 tables for the long side of the sofa and a 3rd table for the short side of the sofa. And there's also going to be some electrification. I've had this cherry for like 6 to 8 months and it was kiln dried to begin with, so it's already nice and stable. I still tested it and it's at about 7 to 8% moisture. This is Eastern white pine and it was also kiln dried, but when I picked it up at my local Home Depot, it had been stored outdoors and it's been really hot and muggy here, so I'm a little paranoid about wood movement. It tests at 9%, which is not bad, but I still stacked and stickered it here in my shop for the last 4 days, and I've had a light fan blowing on it to try to bring it to equilibrium. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start breaking it down, but I'm going to cut it up, and then I'm going to do some light planing, and then stop. For the first round of planing, I just did 1 pass on each side. There were a couple thicker boards where I needed 2 passes, but I just wanted 1 quick light pass, and now I'm going to stack these and let them rest for at least a day, maybe 2, and then continue on planing them down to like 3/4 of an inch thick. And 2 days later, and it's looking really good. It's looking still nice and flat. I'm still checking that by putting the boards on my table saw, which is a known flat surface, and just verifying that they are still nice and flat. So of course I hadn't touched the planer settings, so I can just continue now with a little bit more planing to bring them down to the finished thickness. I want to be sure I'll be alternating sides as I do that. I next moved on and I cut all the leg pieces to size. And I ran into a little bit of an issue because my cross-cut sled isn't large enough for the 28 3/4 that I want to cut. So I had to quickly add on a little auxiliary stop so that I could ensure that all my legs are the same size. So in my design, the legs have legs on them, and I spent some time measuring and marking out how that's going to be. I have 1.5 inches in from each side, and then I measured up 7.5 inches, and I drew a line to come together, and then I still measured down from that because I want to have a little circle at the top of the divider. I think it looks nicer, and I think it makes it a lot easier to cut those angles and clean it out later. But after all that measuring, I still put a stop block on my drill press so that I will guarantee that all of these are in the same spot without measuring. And I'll cut out the V of the legs on the bandsaw. And here's the end result. 2 legs on a leg. The little keyhole cutout at the top means you don't have to try to finesse that a point there. It sort of hides mistakes and also makes sanding and finishing easier. All the rest of the understructure, the rails and the cross pieces, they're all going to be the same 2 inches wide. So for the rest, I have a whole bunch of ripping to do to bring these all down to 2 inches in dimension. I'm going to be using these tabletop mounting clips for attaching the tabletop to the structure, and so now is a good time to run a slot for that in the support structure, and I'll be doing that on the table saw. I'll use the clip itself to set a good enough height for the saw blade. I only need one thickness of the blade to make a cut. I'll use a scrap piece of wood to set it and then take a few test cuts. And after verifying the fit, I can batch out the rest of the pieces. When working with pine, you're probably going to end up with knotty pine. That's just the way it is these days. And I'm trying my best to work around it, but sometimes, you know, I just would have had to throw out too much wood. So here is one where there's not only a knot, but it's actually popped loose. But the way I've arranged it, this is the part where it's going to be attached to the table. So this piece will get attached to the tabletop like that. So the knot will be hidden away on the inside, so nobody's ever going to see it. I'm used to building one-offs, you know, custom pizzas, and this is in a sense a one-off, but it's also 3 tables, and so I'm not used to all the batching out of cutting operations that I've had to do, and in that vein, here's another one. I set up a stop block on my crosscut jig on my table saw, and I've got another 12 little pieces to cut out for the ends of the rails on these tables. So it's upside down, but here's all the parts laid out for the understructure of one of the tables. So I'm about ready to put this together, but I'm going to change gears now, and I'm going to start working on prepping the cherry for the top, because I want to have the cherry ready to go so that once these are assembled, I can get the tops on them as soon as possible. So we're going to shift gears now, and we're going to start breaking down and planing and jointing the cherry top. And I forgot to turn on the camera when I was ripping this piece on the bandsaw. I had to move the bandsaw to the middle of the shop because this is an 8-foot board, but you have to use your imagination. So I continued breaking down the plank, and then I moved on to the standard jointing, and then planing to the desired thickness. Followed by ripping to width, and cutting to final length. Which leaves me with the 3 cherry tabletops that I wanted. And next it's time for a little bit of So for the next step in the process, I'm going to start putting together the rails with these little end pieces, and I'm going to do that on the table saw so that it's a nice flat reference surface. And I'm going to first pin them together with my 23 gauge pinner, and after that I will countersink and fasten them with some screws. These screw holes are going to be underneath the table. They're never going to be seen, but I still like to just plug them up and make it a nice smooth finish. And once the glue is dry, we can cut and sand them flush. I'll be using pocket holes to attach the lower cross pieces, and I want to get those prepared now so they're ready for assembly. So I turned off the camera while I put together the first base. It just let me focus without distractions on finding a good method for that. And now I'm ready to explain it. I'm going to start with putting a little bit of glue here at the top of the leg. And then I'm going to clamp this in place. And then the next one. The base is going to be painted, so I'm not really worried about glue squeeze out, so I'm being generous there. And then I'm going to take this long clamp and use that to clamp everything together. So these clamps were just temporary. making sure this is staying perpendicular to the table. I'm going to be screwing in from the inside, so I need to have space to do that, but I'm seeing a little gap here, so I'm actually going to add another clamp. And then I'm countersinking and next I want to fit in this cross piece, and I got a few jigs and things to help me position it right. Measuring down 10 inches, and I'm just going to clamp this support. This gives me a place where I can rest the cross piece while I'm getting it into position. And next I have a couple of blocks that I can use so that when I line the board up, it's exactly in the middle. And that will also be clamped. A little bit of glue on each end. Fit it in, and I'm just going to give a little, there we go. And another look at how the support is holding it up here, and this spacer block is helping me center it on the board. And then I can use this pocket hole clamp to hold it while I put in a screw. Same on this side. And that was actually the easy part, because now we have to do it again, fitting on the other set of legs and pieces. So over on this side, we only have to add on one leg, but we're adding it onto the already existing structure. Do make sure that you got the mounting slot oriented correctly. Now, what I'm doing differently here is I'm going to use this as a straight edge, because I want to make sure that the whole structure is straight and not curving. So I'm going to clamp using this level as a straight edge, and that's going to straddle the two segments. And now I can put this one here. Again, a temporary clamp. Still have a gap here that I want to deal with, so I'm reaching in with the clamp. And then again, we drill and put in some screws. Now, one difference with this lower cross piece is that on this side, I'm putting the pocket hole screws on that side of the table. And there's a very good reason for that. And the reason is that pocket holes go in at a bit of an angle. And so this screw is going to go in at an angle here, and I want this screw to go at an opposite angle, so there's less chance of the screws hitting each other. If both of these were angled forward, then the screws might hit each other. But I can't fit this clamp in there, so I'm just using a regular clamp to hold the table solid while I put the screws in. And that's the second one complete. Oh, I can do it again with the last one. But again, I'll do that off screen just for the interest of time. And that's the third one. Now I think the next step is going to be priming and painting this, and I'm also going to do that off camera, so in the next clip they should be nice and black. That's what I'm talking about. And with the base assemblies finished, we can turn our attention back to the tops. What I need to do now is cut in some holes to fit these power strips that we bought. I don't really have a fixed spot in mind, but towards the end on this table, and then the next table will be beside it, and so we'll have it at the opposite end of that table. This is one of the two shorter tables, which means it's going on the longer part of the couch, and the idea is that you would have an outlet at either end of the long part of the couch, and on the short end there won't be any outlets, but they can reach this one. So that's why you want it at this end. So this is going to be the corner of the sectional sofa. And then the other end will be down there. So there's a 2-inch overhang, so you have to allow for that. And then there's the thickness of the wood, so you can't get any closer than about 4 inches, but I think about 8 inches. Something about 8 inches from the end should do. Doing a lot of careful measuring. I'm going to put a piece of scrap wood behind where I'm going to be drilling. Clamp that in place. I'm going to be cutting this out with the jigsaw, one of my least favorite tools, but the hole will be hidden behind the plate here, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Start with an access hole in the corner. I put 2 holes at opposite corners, which should make the cutting go smoothly. I open my tail vise nice and wide, so I have a place here that fits right under what I want to cut, so there's plenty of room for the jigsaw blade to not hit anything. Not quite, a little snug. There we go. A little bit of sanding to clean things up, and this one will be ready. And after cutting in the second hole, I did some touch-up sanding and then took all 3 cherry boards out to the garage for finishing. I'm using some wipe-on polyurethane for the finish of the cherry tops. These tables are bound to get glasses or cups placed on them during use, so I want the strong water protection that polyurethane gives. The poly also gives the cherry an instant pop of nice color. Just be aware that wipe-on poly is really quite thin, so I ended up putting 6 coats on top. Normally I might get away with 4, and I have 4 coats on the bottom, whereas normally I might do just 2 coats if it's regular brushing polyurethane. The results are really nice. What I will do now is take a 3M pad with a bit of water and give it a buffing, which takes off any little nibs that might be left behind from like dust getting in the surface or things like that. I actually finished applying the finish probably 4 or 5 days ago. I've been allowing these to cure in the garage. It's good for it to cure and harden off, but also the oil-based poly has a really strong scent, so it's just been nice to let that off gas out in the garage instead of in here. And at the same time, the black paint has also been curing and hardening, because it's also been done for the last 4 or 5 days. Once I have it positioned and centered the way I like, I'm going to clamp it into place so that it stays put while I'm attaching the top to the base. If you'll recall, I'm planning to use these table clips to attach the table, and I have some little 1/2-inch screws. Position the clip, do a little pre-drilling. And repeat umpteen times. So these power bars are the last thing that we're going to be installing on these tables. And I've got these 2 tables positioned together, but when they're installed, they're going to be, attached end to end, and so there'll be 1 outlet at this end and 1 outlet at that end. And I just want to make sure that these power bars are oriented the same way, because I don't want the outlets to face one way at one end and the other way at the other. So these just drop into place, and then we will attach them with a couple of little screws. Just a quick couple of pilot holes. These are really tiny screws, so I hope they don't strip out. Let's just be gentle. So as I've said, this is a really big thing. So I've got the camera backed up, and I've got the lens at its widest setting, and this is what the table is going to look like when it's finally installed. You'll have to just imagine a sofa here. So you've got 1, 2, 3 tables making an L shaped. You got the power bar there and the power bar there with USB as well as regular outlets. And I painted pine black base, and the cherry turned out really nice for the top. So the last little thing, which I don't even know if I'm going to need, are these mending plates. Mending plates are, little steel plates with some holes in it, meant for joining wood, mostly meant for construction, but I'm using it for fine furniture. And the idea is that these tables might sit fine behind the sofa, but they might not. So with these mending plates, I will put that underneath here, and I will be able to join the two tables into one unit when they're behind the sofa so that they will stay flush and not move. Might not need them, but I'm prepared for them to put them here and also in the corner. As I said back at the beginning, this is a commission piece for a family friend, so I'm going to be bringing it over and installing it in their house, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to put that on film, so I will take one of these tables up and position it in my living room, and I'll put that in here now so you get an idea of what it will look like behind a sofa. But otherwise, that's it for this project. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you got some ideas that you can use in your own shop, and we'll see you next time.